Okay, then. I'm going to kick off just because I think we've got a good number of people here. Welcome to today's CSSGJ talk. My name is Oliver Dodd, a PhD candidate in political economy and one of 3 co-directors based at the centre. Today, we are very pleased to host River Butterworth, who is currently the Education Officer based at the Nottingham University Student Union. River has been one of the leading organisers behind a lively campaign over the past year to demilitarise education at the University of Nottingham, but which has also been taking place across academia in Britain in general. To provide some background for today's talk, as some of you may know, despite professing to be committed to human rights, the University of Nottingham is closely involved in supporting the British arms trade and maintains close relations with the military-industrial complex, including companies that have committed widespread human rights abuses. In response, today's talk will uncover why and how universities cooperate with the arms trade and why arms companies have embedded themselves within higher education, while also unraveling what the alternatives to the military-industrial complex in universities could look like. To understand how we might reach this goal, today's talk will focus on recent activism to demilitarize universities, with a discussion on how we might achieve this reality together. Today's talk will be titled Demilitarise UoN, Why the University is Not Committed to Human Rights. River, you have approximately 35 minutes for your talk, and we'll follow this with a similar amount of time for a Q&A or comments and all the rest of it. So over to you.
Perfect, thank you. I'll just share my screen so we can put the presentation on. Does this work for everyone? Can everyone see this?
Yeah, that looks good. If you just want to put the slideshow in the yeah, that's the one. Looks great.
Perfect. Okay, cool. Hello everyone. My name is River Butterworth. My pronouns are they, them. And as said, I'm the Education Officer at the Students' Union. One of the reasons I ran was exactly on this issue. There's been a lot of activism recently to try and decouple the links between the arms trade and UK universities. So yeah, I'll get into it. So this talk will be going over why and how universities cooperate with the arms trade, who runs the arms trade in higher education, like which companies, who has influence, the University of Nottingham and sector-wide complicity within the arms trade, so looking at wider than just University of Nottingham, but also doing a deep dive into how the university operates with the arms trade. Then we'll be going a bit into what the arms trade receives from university collaboration, and then finally what the alternatives and how do we get there, and that's focusing on the activism in higher education and the ethical alternatives. So this slide is a bit messy, but it's here to exemplify what the university's strategy is and its vision, and how much they talk about, you know, trying to have a university without borders, where they change the world and create a culture of, you know, making the world a better place of fairness, and, you know, solving problems and saving lives and respect, and contributing to a sustainable planet. The university is like severely lacking on a lot of these issues, and I think it's worth noting that you know, this vision is like a complete contradiction when the university is complicit in the arms trade, because as said, the arms trade leads to many human rights abuses, and the university cannot try and promote this to students or staff, no matter how hard they try, if you know, if it's just a vague statement that doesn't actually mean anything. And it also talks about like no borders, but the university has investments in companies that you know, make money and profit off border violence, and is also failing on its sustainable goals, and has fallen 43 places in the People and Planet Ethical and Sustainable League rankings. So on all these visions and all these you know, statements, they're failing at all of them. And it's a pretty good exemplar of like how the university likes to promote itself and say it's doing good things at the same time as like not committing to actually solving the problem. So firstly, we'll get into why the university is complicit with the arms trade. I think it's worth noting firstly that This hasn't just been since tuition fees have increased to £9,250, but it was before that, and there is a historic link between the UK universities and the arms trade and how that links to the government. But in recent history, basically, the universities have been underfunded by the government and will look for money and investment in other places. They will prioritize this profit, as they are now for-profits in a for-profit system to try and outcompete with other universities. Not that Nottingham, the University of Nottingham, is especially poor. It has £139 million in unspent reserves and almost £1 billion in its total value. So if it really wanted to, it probably could afford to. But yeah, this investment is still beneficial in terms of what the university gets out of it. And arms companies have more than enough money to provide to universities, and they'll do research for the highest bidder, no matter what ethical or moral implications that provides. And it's kind of, we'll touch on this later, but it's kind of changed how universities and their role of creating knowledge and research is going to be shaped in a very specific way to reach certain means. So I'll go to the next slide. So this slide basically explains how universities and the University of Nottingham collaborates with the arms trade. The highest amount of collaboration that it gets is 55% of a total of £1 billion that has been found currently. There's still a lot of research to do, but £1 billion is currently what we know the figure is, with half the universities researched in the UK, and almost 55% of this comes from research partnerships. So that's when the government or a government funded body or private companies go to universities and say, we need this research done, will you help us? And universities oblige and collaborate with these companies. And this can be for technology, aeronautics, and other projects that are often hid under what they're actually being used for. The other half is shareholdings, so that's 45%. This is monetary investments that are made by universities, either directly into arms companies or indirectly through investment in fund managers, and sometimes pension funds and stuff like that are being put into arms companies via the fund managers basically. And the universities sometimes say they have very little control over this or try and change to a more ethical supplier, but a lot of the time, these fund managers still, they make a lot of profit because the arms trade makes a lot of money, so they still invest in them. And then finally, employment. The UK university system is built to push people into employment, and arms trade sees this as a great place to recruit the next generation of people who will be creating lethal weapons to do harm in other countries. It's vital for their continuation that they continue to recruit new students to get in the arms trade, and also with the best research and the highest skilled workforce, it means they can continue to go in a cycle of recruiting more people to the arms trade, often unknowingly of what the consequences of these companies are. And then part of this as well is academic partnerships. So that includes, when you go on a placement or something, and also career opportunities. So if you're in engineering, they'll have talks and be jobs you could go into is creating, engines, not specifically engines what for, we wouldn't know that. But then you delve into it and it's going to be used for airplanes that will then be used and sold to foreign countries or even our own to do acts of war. It's not great. So here is University of Nottingham's breakdown of how much they received. In terms of investments, the university still has a few investments, but it's a very small amount. But in the whole context, it doesn't invest as much in its pension scheme or its investments. The main way it relates to the arms trade is by research funding. So as you can see, this is all in the last 5 years or from 5 years ago to the future. So I think the latest one is 2023. Rolls-Royce have given £31 million. ESPRC has given £28 million. BAE Systems has given £90 million. And the Ministry of Defence has given £1 million. This complicity also occurs at careers fair, where the university will hold, and it, like the one we disrupted was an engineering and technology careers fair, and they'll basically get paid by these companies a few £1,000s to come and set up a stall and speak to students. We uncovered that 18 of the 82 companies that the University of Nottingham invited were like related to war in some way, or arms manufacturers, or have been involved in like human rights abuses. And the university as well also collaborates with these companies by having masters and PhDs. So like Rolls-Royce sponsors PhDs. BA has this like strategic partnership, which means a lot of people are like doing research for them without even knowing. And yeah, students can join placements. And also at the bottom right, there's a photo on the university's career service website about careers you could join, careers you could get. And one of them is the armed forces, and then it says like a bunch of stuff about how great the armed forces is to work for and why you should do it. And, doesn't really say what that might implicate with you working there. So firstly, we'll be looking at like the companies in deep dive now, in a short deep dive, but BAE Systems, Europe's biggest arms manufacturer, really awful company. They've been involved in lots of human rights abuses where their weapons are sold to. And they're the 7th largest in the world, and sold almost £18 billion of planes and other equipment to Saudi Arabia. And these were then used in the war in Yemen, and has created one of the worst humanitarian crises. Also has 6,500 staff there to support the capabilities of these aircraft and these other technologies. And it just so happens that the University of Nottingham has a strategic partnership with BAE Systems. As of like a few years ago, they'd already been working for 10 years, and they said, you know what, let's have a strategic partnership where we can work more closely with the biggest arms manufacturer in Europe. Not great, a pretty bad indictment on the university. The next company is Rolls-Royce. Most people think Rolls-Royce only make cars or like engines, but 17th largest arms company in the world, and exports to, has 160 export licenses for military goods in 10 years. And again, the selling of these planes they often produce was used in Yemen as well. And 26% of their profit comes from the sales of arms. And yeah, in 160 customers in 103 countries, so it's pretty global. And they have had like disputes where they have not followed, although like the law of like selling weapons is not, too strong to stop like war crimes and stuff happening. They've still been embroiled in claims of like fraud and other like bribery and lobbying and stuff like that. So again, not a good company, and the University of Nottingham often supports their projects and does a lot to like get involved with them and takes a lot of money. That's where the most research comes from. EPSRC. This is a government-funded body, and it often co-sponsors programs backed by weapon companies through or like set up and like kind of designed by the Ministry of Defence. It kind of like guides where the research is going. And yeah, these are officially classed as non-military, but often they go towards building like national defense capability. So basically making stuff for the arms companies or making stuff that will be used in conflicts. And a lot of it, yeah, they try and hide and say, we couldn't possibly know where this research is going. We're just doing it for the greater good. But if you see how the EPSRC is linked to Ministry of Defence and also these arms companies as well, and often as well, one of the worst things is like the research that's funded is in like collaboration with arms companies. or it is for the arms companies. So like the way they get funding is by collaborating and getting joint money from arms companies and EPS RC to invest in research that will then be used in conflict zones. The Ministry of Defence, I just kept this in because I've got it from Wikipedia, because it says His Majesty's government. I just found that really funny. But yeah, British moment. But basically the headquarters of the armed forces, and it implements defence policy and basically does what the government tells it to. The new strategy of the MOD is to basically increase spending and increase research to make the UK like a head of scientific research on war, basically, and universities is a big part of this. And universities in this cycle are often at the beginning stages, and then they get further used and built together. So like often they won't tell a university to build a whole fighter jet, but they'll siphon off different parts of it to different universities. The university will do this research, and then they'll use that research in a bigger project to like create an airplane or create like some AI system that will help be more lethal in war zones. So in general, the UK's as a whole, the higher education sector, complicity with the arms trade, is around 1 billion, but we've only the place that's doing a lot of the research has only uncovered like half of the university partnership so far. So it is expected to be much higher than that. And that is only in like recent history as well. I don't think that goes back as far as like some other places. Like I don't think it goes back to like 90s or 80s. I think it's like since like 2010. So I know we know there's a lot of like investment happening between like the 2000s to now. So I'm not even sure if it like encounters that. But the setup of the sorry, my WhatsApp's going off and I don't know how to turn it off. There's some person saying stuff. But yeah, there's a close relationship between the defence sector and the UK. And often the ethics and frameworks that universities adapt often have a lack of safeguard for the way that research is used, and often, even if they do have a good ethical investment policy, often isn't followed and prioritizes profit instead. And often universities try to avoid transparency or accountability of these issues. Some universities, if you do a freedom of information request, will just outrightly deny that you can see their investments or their research investments, because they say it like hurts their like competitive capabilities in the market if you would know what they're investing in and where they're getting their money from. It's a very dubious way to avoid actually being held to account. Yeah. So what does the arms trade review receive from university corporation? Yeah, I think of the last slide as well, like as part of this, because the UK doesn't have this transparency and students don't know, a lot of the times students who are doing research for these companies often don't know the extent, because they won't advertise research to you as being like, this would be used in a war zone. They'll be like, you're making engines more efficient, or you're making like planes more sustainable. But climate change isn't going to be solved with fighter jets. And the research capabilities that could be built, we'll go into this more later, but yeah, it could be going in different directions. And often as well, the decision to do this research comes from the top, no matter like how people below believe or think about this research. And often if you don't take this research up, it's often a threat to your career, and also means that you don't have the same opportunities of universities. So it is a whole like UK system where it is hard to see one university doing it without others, because then they would say in their profit schemes to like compete with universities to say, well, we can't be profitable anymore. So I think part of it is about like making students and staff aware of this, so they can then put efforts into senior management and kind of making a situation where it's not a possibility to avoid this issue, because people are aware of it and people are going to campaign on it. Yeah, cool. So what does the arms trade receive from University Corporation? The first one, research and development. Universities basically get improved performance. A lot of universities have very good engineering and science departments that can take out very good forms of research with very highly skilled people. And a lot of the time as well, engineering departments actually like co-funded or co-sponsored by arms companies. So they're built specifically for this reason. And that means that they can contract out the research that they need to do for military projects without having to do it themselves. And it means that universities are fully embroiled and have been for the last 20, 30 years in the system. And universities have kind of been set up in this way to basically go hand in hand with arms companies, which makes it harder to demilitarize because the whole system and like collaboration between the government, public and private bodies and universities means that it's a very like circular system of like how they respond together. Talent acquisition, loads of people at universities who have really good talent, and by offering a bit more money, because these companies are very, very rich and very, very powerful, they can offer more money to graduating students, and students go, okay, I'm out of university, my whole university like journey, I've been told, okay, I need to get a job, and a lot of people are interested in getting higher pay slips, and unfortunately this means that like some of the best researchers and some of the best students coming out of these departments are going into arms companies and helping them be more lethal. Product testing, again, testing facilities and expertise, to mean that like the safety of weapons and performance don't have to be done, they can just be contracted out. Yeah, and intellectual property as well. By collaborating with universities, any of this research that could be used to improve lethality or improve like safety within their own like weapon systems, it means that by working with them, they kind of have like joint leases on these properties, so they can use them how they want, and there's no like kind of safeguarding to make sure that like this research isn't being used in a bad way, because they already have that collaborative license over it. And then finally, social license, because universities are seen as like a social good, and you know, something that helps thrive social mobility, and you know, isn't seen as a place that has bad links and is, you know, helping people. When arms companies get involved with universities, it kind of changes the perception around them. We'll go into this more later, but basically it allows them to kind of like move how people perceive of arms companies and the research they're doing in a more kind of like socially acceptable way. But we'll get into that point more later, but it's just useful to say now. So what does this you know, collaboration actually do? Like what are the main things that arms companies are getting out of it? So normalizing militarism is a huge part of what the arms companies do by working with universities. The UK before 2020 was already like one of the most heavily armored nations in the world, and linked to many human rights abuses in different countries. But in 2020, the government announced the largest increase to the military budget in 70 years, and committed £197 billion. Wow, over 10 years, and emphasized that part of this investment should be in emerging technologies. This has pushed the research and development budget, which is often how universities get funding within the arms trade, by 100%. So they're much more likely to get even more of these contracts and be shifted even more in this way towards providing research for arms companies. This will only like entrench the relations further, and it also it puts like a positive face on the industry, and because of like the positive associations that they have at careers fair and talking to students and kind of shifting that perception, the PR legitimizes military spending, and if if universities are getting money from research from the arms trade, investing in the arms trade must be good, because then it's creating more social jobs, more social goods, more research, more careers. But that is a very dubious thing that they like to present. But in reality, it's not always like that. And finally, because of this relation to universities, it can kind of lead to this circular system where these companies are going in the top. You can see a triangle, and that's the government, the military, and the defense industry. And basically, when the defense industry says, hey, look at all this good stuff we're doing in universities, look at all this research we can create, look at all these jobs, look at the university funding, and go to the government and say, so that means we need more weapons, that means we need a higher budget for security. And then they go to the military, and the military says, okay, great, spend more on us, we can do more, we can be more effective. And they go back to the defense industry, and they then use research to create better weapons. It creates a circular system where universities are caught in the middle and used as a kind of a means to boosting up military spending, because it supposes that universities don't have enough money, so the more funding they get from these companies means it's better overall, when ultimately, like, we should not have these links, and like the university shouldn't be like a talking point to invest more in the military. Like, it should be the opposite, at least, saying we don't have enough funding, we should look at other avenues. But this kind of like constant relation to the military means that it only gets worse every time they increase spending. And like the fact that the 100% increase in research budget will be put at universities kind of explores that idea. Like, that's what's happening with it. Yeah, that's pretty much it for this side. But I think as well, aspiring scientists look for research, and if there's that lack of research from the government, or like lack of research in green energy, or companies that are trying to do green, sustainable things that have the same amount of money, it means that people will be kind of forced in some way to take this research up. That means that if they don't do this, arms companies only get even more power, because this cycle continues where universities become reliant on the arms trade. And that's sort of at the situation right now. Like, from conversations with the university, they basically say they can't afford to, and have to restructure the whole engineering department because of these links. So because of this like constant military spending and the shift that prioritizes like that form of security with the military, it's kind of put universities in a position where it's very hard to escape the system. And this normalizing of militarism through the media, through government policy, through these companies coming onto campus telling everyone it's great, means that it's a really hard thing to escape now. Yeah, so that's how it promotes militarism and normalizes it within universities. People don't see it as a thing that's bad, because it's just seen as a normal thing, and it's just seen as research. Ultimately, it's much more than that, and that research has often been used to make systems of war more effective in lethality. Next slide. I don't know how I'm doing for time, but we'll pretend that I'm doing good. Upholding British imperialism. Basically, former colonial powers have huge power to exert in the influence of the world, and by having a highly stocked military, they can often use this to maintain influence, and basically make sure they still have the structures of maintaining power across the globe. And I think part of this as well is that a lot of the time it's British bombs, British aerospace, British missiles that's being used around the world to commit war crimes. And this is kind of like, historically, the UK and Britain have done things, but now it's just kind of like shrouded underneath contracts and government like collaboration and stuff, but it's not seen as like, if there's a war happening, it's not seen as Britain's fault, but in some ways it almost is because of the way we support these regimes in doing this. I think because of the profit that they can make from this, they often avoid dealing with the accountability of like what these weapons are actually doing. So profit outweighs justice to these companies, and if a country has strategic political importance to the UK, no matter whether or not they're like committing war crimes or doing horrible things in these countries or creating occupations, the UK will still profit off giving them weapons. And also because it's a strategic place to have allies, they will ignore these crimes of war and war crimes and human rights abuses because of the strategic importance. And that kind of means that these governments and these regimes kind of understand that the UK and the global West aren't like going to do anything about it, because it's more strategic just to kind of like watch by and do nothing. And that kind of gives them the strength to just do whatever they want in these countries, which leads to a lot of war crimes. So like by the UK having this like culture of security and this like progression to keep on increasing the securitization, it means that the UK has more power to basically interrupt in countries at once. If you see like Iraq and Afghanistan, this buildup of military means they can take more involvement in these places. And also it means that strategic places with importance like Saudi Arabia, it means that they can continue to support these places. And these conflicts will only grow with the bigger securitization that happens across the world. And the more places that have weapons means more places have to buy more weapons. And this constant like buildup of arms means that it keeps on continuing in a cycle. And in this cycle, the only way to kind of get out of it is for people to stop militarizing more and more and more. But the opposite is happening, and universities are continuing this work and continuing these structures of conflict abroad because it gets them money, basically. So this slide is about, we're almost done now, luckily. This slide is about what is the value of university. Arguably the role is to like empower people, undertake research for like the human greater good, if that's even a thing, but like, not do things that are harming people, tackle society's problems, promote values, ethics, these kind of things that make the world a better place. And to this viewpoint, they shouldn't be influenced by corporate interest or government interest, and shouldn't be pushed one way or another. They should be kind of like neutral to these things and make sure that these profits aren't being put above like what the core values of the university are. And you see of the vision earlier that the university still kind of believes that has this like importance to play in the world of like being sustainable, being fair, being equal, like open borders, but in reality it's not. And when universities are kind of selling out to this kind of idea, they can be brought for research, no matter how bad that research is. It's kind of, it sets up the idea that we can't really trust universities to kind of lead in this front anymore, and we shouldn't for a long time. But it kind of undermines the whole value of university, and like something that's like a benefit to the people in this country and across the world, and like a way of like sharing knowledge and like helping each other and like making the world a better place. Like the university can't say it's doing that, and because of universities being seen as this like the I'm still here. Cool. Sorry, my internet said it's unstable. Because it's providing this education and wants to perceive itself, wants people to perceive it in a particular way, it completely lies in the way it advertises itself. And higher education institutions are basically taking everyone for a run who thinks that they're like, only doing good things. Like sometimes they do good research, but other times they do awful research, which is being used in conflicts. So like it's kind of time to take a nuanced approach around what universities' values are now, and kind of time to stop trusting them when they tell you they're doing good work, because a lot of the time they will sell out to the highest bidder, no matter what that research consists of. Pretty much it. So what are the alternatives? What could we be doing instead? A really big opportunity in this country is green and ethical renewable futures. The arms trade, when it comes to jobs, is a declining industry, and it really doesn't make that many jobs compared to the amount of money it has. It's not a good job creator. Something that could be a good job creator is offshore wind, marine energy, sustainable energy in the UK, and renewable industry. It's a very renewable industry, and there's lots of opportunities, and all the world basically right now, because of climate change, is asking for this research and asking for this, the answer to climate change. Where do we get it from? Who's investing in this? And often the people who invest in this research first and have the rights to it can sell it for more, and then have the skilled people to go and help other countries implement renewable energy. And it's a really good opportunity to skill up people and not do something bad, and actually make the world a better place. If we stick to the university's vision, this is the kind of research that they should be doing. And in terms of research as well, there is a few risks in it, because obviously one day to the next, you can't just suddenly decide that we're changing all the research and everything's going to change. But as a future kind of inspiration, we could put the best scientific researchers, or some of the best in the world, of all the investment and training that they get in the UK, and we could actually use it to shift around what our priorities are, and actually create things to tackle problems like climate change, and help avert the humanitarian crises. No matter which way you look at it, the problems created by climate change is going to be huge, and it kind of needs the investment and research now to kind of try and avoid it at best, almost. But currently this isn't really happening. But it kind of needs not just universities to say, hey, we're going to do this, but to avoid investing in arms companies, it kind of needs some alternative investment, because a lot of the time sustainable companies aren't as rich as, or don't have the capacity to go and offer research to every university in the UK. So it kind of needs a concerted attempt by the government to provide funding. It kind of needs it needs the high skills that the UK already has. So that's a point that it needs some of the high skilled people to leave the kind of arms industry, and that will help with the kind of constant cycle of securitization as well. And it kind of needs all of us to kind of push the government and universities in this way. And it kind of needs more understanding of the issues in universities, and more people who will campaign on these issues and know about it and can tell other people about it. And I think that's one of the best things we can do, is just get the message out that this is happening, and kind of create a big movement to stop this. But yeah, it's not just something that happened overnight. It does need a lot of work on it, and but fossil fuels divestments happened. Not that universities are perfect now, but that was something that was achieved over 10 years, and this is something similar that is an achievable goal, and is something that universities are moving into anyway. So the quicker we can push it, the better and the safer world we have. What can we use this funding for instead? There's no magic money tree unless it's the army. Government will say we can't afford to give pay rises, nationalize anything. Free education can't happen, but then we'll spend loads of money in the arms trade. It could be spent on many better things that can actually affect people in their daily lives. But instead it's not, and I think there needs to be a general push, no matter which party or which political orientation you have, like, and none of them at the moment seem to be going in this way, other than like some small ones. But this is a video. I would show it, but I think I'm running slow. Maybe we can show it at the end if we really want. But basically, now we're moving on to like the activism. How do we get there? And this is kind of talking about what are the routes to reach this goal of demilitarization in universities. So this is when we went to careers fair, science and technology careers fair, where they had those 18 out of 82 companies and did a die-in and basically protested it and made noise, and also gave out 800 leaflets to students. So a lot of students who were going in there were unaware, and then they were like, okay, I'm not going to go and speak to those companies now. And I think that's one of the best ways that we can disrupt the arms trade, is to stop the inflow of students who either don't know or will go and talk to them. The more risk it has to their kind of interests means that they're less likely to build lethal weapons that will be used to harm people. Yeah, and I think as well, doing actions like this kind of build that awareness. And it's disrupting these companies. Like BAE Systems pulled out because of they were scared of the bad PR, and the university told them to pull out of the careers fair, basically, because the university knows that having these links is not a good image to have, and they told them not to come. But unfortunately for them, there was another 17 companies who were also involved in the arms trade, so it wasn't hard to look for other companies to protest against. But the university knows this is a bad thing, and they want it to be a thing that is under the rug and students don't know about. And we'll talk about more about the strategies later, but yeah, it's a really important thing to do. So historic activism in demilitarizing universities. Basically with students, movements, you know, kind of like rise and fall. Basically, whenever students graduate and that knowledge and that action isn't passed on, the movements will fall. So like there was big waves in 2010 to 2013, 2005 to 2008, but it's kind of been missing the last few years, until like recently in the last like year or so. It's also gone alongside diverse movements and boycott and diverse sanctions and other things like that. So it's often not just demilitarization the goals, but it kind of like leads into other things as well, which means that like some of the wins that we've seen aren't just like demilitarization, but are also linked to these other issues. Yeah, and some groups like Disarm UCL got an ethical investment policy implemented, and a student union motion like we did here. But unfortunately, this ethical investment policy from recent FOIs was found that it wasn't being followed, and they're still investing and taking research investments from arms companies. So, you know, I think getting that ethical investment policy doesn't always fix the problem. So what have we achieved? Some universities have made the first steps towards ending their partnership with the arms trade and been looking at alternative ways they can get research investments. As I said, ethical investment policies have been one. One of the biggest things to win is the companies have stopped, universities have stopped these companies coming to careers fairs, because they're scared of the PR and the protest by students, which has been a really good thing. It's kind of stopped these companies thinking that they can just use universities and get away with it without any like backlash. And a database has been created recently by Demilitarise Education or Education to kind of like hold all the research, which has been really useful for researching stuff. So what is like the recent history and the stuff that we've been involved with? In October, there was 7 protests and occupations across 5 UK universities. Lancaster, Warwick, Nottingham, Bristol, Sheffield, all disrupted careers fairs and recruitment events, which was really good. And Lancaster just last week occupied again to get arms companies off campus, which is really cool. Student union motions, basically passing the student consensus doesn't want arms companies on campus. Research into the arms trade has been a very big thing that we've been doing, and it kind of built the pathway for other students to find out this information and have it accessible, which is like some of the hardest work. and commitments to ethical investments, ethical careers. There's movement on this, but again, from the career service, they have said that this will only happen from like a top-down decision from the university, and they can't decide it themselves. Yeah, cool. Yeah, so I think that's everything, unless I can remember other stuff. I've probably skipped past a lot of stuff because my brain's very frazzled today, and I haven't done actual like academic stuff in a long time because I've been working in SU. But yeah, if there's any questions, I'll probably remember what I was going to say anyway. It's just all stored in my head and not on the slides. But yeah, I think in terms of like a Q&A or what we want to do after this, like I think like a discussion in terms of like how do we get there could be really useful, because it kind of isn't just the thing that students can get involved in. It's kind of a thing that needs like an attempt through everyone coming together, and any like organized force on campus and any ideas we can have beyond, you know, just making PR, like holding meetings with universities, any ideas or like any outreach we can do is the kind of first step, because again, this movement is in its first stages again, which means it's a really exciting time to get involved with. It also means a lot of work is done, and I think any ideas that we can have and use to promote this kind of like different reality that we envision would be really useful. But yeah, thanks for having me talk, and I think it's a really important issue that, you know, often people don't know about because universities won't promote. And I think it's really important that you tell everyone you can who works in universities, so everyone is aware of these issues. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you very much, River. That was an excellent talk. Learned so much from it. And I'm sure a lot of people also learned a lot about the militarisation of education in Britain and University of Nottingham in particular. So thank you so much for that brilliant talk.